2025 is finally here, and if you want this year to be the year that you get good at Rainbow Six Siege, you need the best settings. So in today's video, I'm going to be giving you the best settings for the new year. As you can see right now, this is what my game looks like. These are my preferred settings, so I'm going to use this as a benchmark of what your game should look like. Now, the first tab I want to go over in this video so you can get your game looking good is your display settings. Now, if you want to play the best and you want to have the best performance, unfortunately, your game is not going to look the best. Now, this is what your game could look like if you want it to look as best as possible, but this is what your game is going to look like if you want to actually win games. So how do you make your game look like this? To do this, the first thing I'm going to get you to do is go to your display settings. One thing that's extremely important to me is turning my HUD display area off of 100, which is typically default, and putting it down to 80, which is the lowest you can possibly put it. When I have my HUD onto 100, the HUD is very, very big. At the top where the match header is, you can see it's very large, and on the bottom right where it shows my entire loadout, what abilities I have, how much ammo I have, etc., that's also very large. Let's say, for example, I want to pass through this door, but I also want to ADS the Z hallway in case there's an enemy. The unfortunate part about having my HUD as large as it is that my ammo count in the bottom right would actually cover any cap can traps on this door. And there are many other examples of your HUD being too large, which will cover things. But if you go to options, you go to display, and you scroll down to HUD display area, and you turn it down to 80, it may be more centered on your screen, but the edges of your screen won't be covered, and you'll be able to see more, especially because your HUD is actually smaller. The smaller your HUD is and the less things you have going on your screen, the more your brain's going to be able to focus on things too, which will improve your reaction time and can be the difference between you winning gunfights or losing those gunfights. Now that we've gone over our HUD though, what are some other changes we can make to optimize our game? If you go back to your display settings, your aspect ratio is a big one. The default you will be put on for most players is 16:9. 16:9 isn't actually a terrible aspect ratio, but having a larger aspect ratio actually makes scopes easier to look through. For example, this 2.5 times scope ADS at a door has a very small glass circle that covers the scope. But if I were to go to options, go to display, and turn my aspect ratio to something like 16:10, now that oval is a little bit wider, which can be the difference between, again, you seeing somebody or not seeing somebody. This is especially prevalent when you have 1x scopes or iron sights. Having a wider aspect ratio makes it a lot easier for you to see on those 1x sights, which is why you'll see people who like main smoke typically play on an aspect ratio of about 4:3. 4:3 is super wide, but look at how much easier it is to look through these iron sights than on an aspect ratio that's smaller. People even take it to the extreme of running something like 5:4. Now it almost looks like I'm zooming in with an ACOG on this 1x scope. The only bad thing about having a stretched res is the more stretched your res is. One, you have less peripheral vision, but two, enemies seem to move faster on your screen, so you have to have a good reaction time if you want to run a wide aspect ratio. So for me personally, I think the best aspect ratio for every single player is 16:10. You still get it stretched enough to where it's easy to see through scopes, but it also doesn't make the game look ugly, and you don't need a crazy fast reaction time to be able to use the scope. I've tested out every aspect ratio. This one is the best. Your FOV is also something you can play with. By default, it comes on 60. Not only does this make it to where it feels like you're moving slower, which can affect your decision making, but also you have less peripheral vision, which you never really want to have in a game like Siege. At the bare minimum, I would turn this up to 82. That is like the bare minimum people use. Personally though, I think the best range of FOV is between 87 or 84. Personally, I run 87 because that's just what I'm used to, but you can run anything in between that range. It's going to give you the perfect balance between peripheral vision, scope size, and the feeling of having high mobility. Every other display setting really is not that important. You want to make sure you're on full screen so you get the most amount of FPS. You want your highest refresh rate. You want to actually have your FPS limit on your refresh rate. Having an uncapped FPS limit will actually trick your computer into working harder, or so I've heard, which can make it to where you have less consistent frames even though they're uncapped. So I consistently like to have it just at my highest hertz rate, which is around 144. You also want it at 1920 by 1080 resolution. And then for your brightness, you want to have it on at least 60. 60 is usually the lowest, and I have a pretty bright monitor, so I run 60, but typically people will run 65 to 70, and I think that's a good spot to have your brightness around. Now that we've gone over display settings though, let's go over what most of you clicked on this video for, which is your graphic settings. Now, as of right now, I have the best graphic settings that you could have on. To get this, you want to make sure again that you don't have max graphics on. Having max graphics on is going to make your game seem more realistic. It's going to also make it look better. And if you have a high-end PC, that can be nice. But again, this video is made for people who want to perform the best. So for most of your settings, you're going to want to put them actually on low. I'm not a PC expert, but I know having more graphics makes this yellow bar right here go up more, and having it lower makes the yellow bar go down more. I'm pretty sure that has to do with VRAM. Correct me in the comments if I am wrong, but your PC working harder will give you more inconsistent frames, which will make you play worse on average. So turn all of your quality graphics onto low, except for a few exceptions. For one, you need your LOD quality to be max. Putting this on Ultra is going to not make your PC work as hard, but it's still going to give you the results that you're desiring. All turning up LOD quality does is turn up the quality of certain things over your distance. So I want a reinforced wall to look like a reinforced wall over 30 meters. But if this is like on low, for example, a wall would look like it has less quality, and you wouldn't be able to distinguish if there was a punch hole on the wall or a bullet hole, or if the wall was reinforced if this is super, super low. So having this on high makes it to where you can see more details over a longer range, which is very necessary if you're taking gunfights from a longer range. And it also doesn't, again, make your PC work too hard. So turn this on to Ultra. Something else you need to turn on is your shadow quality. I also turn this on to max. Now, to show you why you should have shadows on, I'm going to bring you to the map of Clubhouse. Now, people love to play in rafters when defending CC cache. Why that is an entire video for a different day. However, one of the benefits of defending rafters is that if you have shadows on, you can see people's shadow before you're able to actually see them, which is a huge advantage. To show you this, I'm going to go ahead and put this deployable shield down in front of the door. And as you can see with shadows on Ultra, I can clearly see this shadow. Even from rafters, I can see that shadow. And usually that shadow is of a person. So I'm going to be able to react to them being on the door, and I'm going to know that they're there without them knowing I'm there, which is a huge advantage in gunfights. However, let's say that I go to options, I go to graphics, and I turn my shadow quality to low. That shadow is a lot harder to see. It's still visible, but again, having it on very high makes it a lot more distinct and a lot more visible. It'll be the difference between you seeing them and seeing them reloading their gun. That's how much having high shadows can make a difference. So make sure that that setting is also on high. Now, like I've been saying, you want pretty much everything on low except for these two settings, but there's one other setting that you should mess with, and that is your anti-aliasing. Anti-aliasing in this game isn't that good, and I think dealing with your sharpness and render scaling can actually make your PC work harder than it has to for little to no results. So I recommend completely turning this off, hitting apply, and then this is going to be the best graphic settings that you can possibly run. Now that we've moved on to that, I want to quickly go over my accessibility settings. I've talked about many times in the past what crosshair color you should be running on your gun. As you can see right now, I do run green. Sometimes I like to switch around to purple, and I do think that out of every choice you have in the game, these two are the best crosshair color choices, and I'll tell you why. First of all, let's try to spawn peek on the map of Coastline. If I were, for instance, to turn my crosshair color to white or any really bright color, it's going to be a lot more difficult for me to actually see where my crosshair is relative to somebody who is in ruins, for example. That's going to make taking that gunfight a lot harder to do, especially on brighter maps, and because they took night maps out of the game, most maps outside are bright, so having a white crosshair color is never really a good idea. So you might think running a black crosshair, which is the darkest one you can have, would be a great idea, but here's the issue. Just like there is a bright outside, some rooms are dark. Out of all the maps that I could have picked, this probably isn't the best example, but even something like this where it's meshed in with a door frame, especially if you have a low opacity on your crosshair, this can be difficult to take gunfights with. So I don't recommend running black either. I don't recommend running yellow or light green, as again, they are too bright. I don't like light blue for the same exact reason. I also think that light orange and orange blends in on a lot of beige maps like Border, Fortress, or the Orange Stairs on Emerald Plains. I think blue is just a little bit too dark, just like black, so I don't really like to run blue either. So with all of those out of the way, what does that leave us? Well, that leaves us with red, or the default, which is red, but just with a little bit of green on some other guns. Here's my issue with red. There are some rooms that have red walls, which can make using a red crosshair just as difficult as it would be using a white crosshair outside. And it's not just this map. Most other maps in the game have at least one room that is red. I don't know why, but that's just the case. So running a red crosshair, or the default crosshair, which is just mostly red, is not good either. So that leaves turquoise, green, and purple as the best options. Turquoise, in my opinion, is just a little bit too green. There's a lot of green on some maps, especially maps like Emerald Plains, and again, it's just too bright for my liking, so I don't recommend running turquoise. I used to run it a lot. It's not that bad, but it's just not the best option, which is why I think the best crosshair colors in the game are green and purple. I personally think purple is the best. It doesn't blend in with the most amount of things, whereas green on a map, again, like Emerald Plains, is kind of difficult to deal with. Purple has the least amount of things that it blends into. It's just bright, but not too bright enough to where I think it's the best crosshair in the game. However, some people think that green is the best crosshair in the game because there's not a lot that it blends into, but your brain actually reacts to green the fastest. It takes in the information of green the fastest. Some people say that that's the reason they run the crosshair, but I don't think that that logically makes sense. When you're ADS'd and you're taking a gunfight, you don't need to react to your crosshair. Your crosshair's already in front of your face. You need to react to the enemy. So it doesn't matter what color your brain reacts to the fastest because you're not reacting to your crosshair. Even if green is the fastest color that your brain reacts to, it's only by a few milliseconds, and that is not enough large of enough difference to make it the best crosshair in the game. So I personally do think that purple is the best crosshair color in the game. Green is definitely a close second place, which is why I honestly have been running it these past few weeks. So it is personal preference between these two. But now that we've gone over optic colors, let's go over something a little bit more important, which is actually gadget colors. To show you this, I've brought you onto Cafe. Now, when you place down a claymore by default, because it's your claymore and by default your team color is blue, that claymore laser is going to appear to be blue. But because your teammate color is blue, that means that your opponent color is going to be red. So let's pretend that I'm a defender trying to flank red stairs. If my opponent's color is red, which it is by default, it's going to be a lot harder for me to see this claymore line when I'm flanking up red stairs. However, if you do what I recommend, which is turning on your team color to red and your opposing team color to blue, it makes it actually a lot easier to see the claymore when you're flanking on a red staircase. Now, you could say that it's dependent on the map, because on some maps there are blue staircases, so this would be null and void, which I do think is actually true. However, I do think even on those blue staircases, a blue laser actually pops out more just because the blue laser is brighter than the red one, so it's still pretty easy for you to see. I also think that defender utility, whether it be cameras or Valkyrie cameras, pretty much anything hidden, is a lot easier to see when it's blue than it is if it's red, which is why I like not only having my teammate color on red, but having my opposing teammate color on blue for attack and for defense. It is personal preference, but if I were you, I would turn on your team color to red and your opposing team color to blue. The next setting you need to change in this tab is your screen shake intensity. So by default, if you didn't know, if anything explodes next to you, your entire screen shakes. So with screen shake intensity on, let's test that out. It's not much, but the closer you get to the explosion, the more it's going to shake. And if somebody were on the other side of that wall and I wanted to take a gunfight with them, my entire screen shaking makes it way harder for me to take that gunfight. Back when this wasn't the setting that you could turn off, this is something I died because of a lot. So make sure that you turn off screen shake intensity. So let's compare what I just did to throwing an impact on a wall without screen shake intensity. In 3, 2, 1. As you can see in this example, compared to the other one, my screen didn't shake at all, which makes it a lot easier for you to take gunfights immediately when you breach open a wall. Now, other than that, nothing here is really that important. Turning motion blur on and off when you get shot is completely optional, and turning on your stun to white or dark is completely optional as well. So I'm going to leave the accessibility tab for this video. The next thing I want to go over is audio settings. Now, there is a huge debate on whether hi-fi or night mode is the best option for your dynamic range. TV mode is not the best unless you're on a TV, so I'm not even going to include that in today's video. Me personally, I go back and forth on the hi-fi night mode issue. There are pros and cons to both. If you're talking about the best audio quality, if you want to have the most immersive experience, hi-fi is going to be your best option. It has the least amount of noise compression, meaning you're going to hear noises at a higher quality. The unfortunate thing about that though, is things like gunfire and explosions are much louder. To show you this, I'm gonna put my master volume at 100. Right now my game's pretty loud, and if I were to shoot a gun, it's very, very loud. Let's compare that audio, though, to night mode audio. The gunfire on night mode is slightly quieter. You may not be able to notice the difference in the YouTube video, let me know in the comments, but it is noticeably quieter. The reason that people prefer night mode over hi-fi is because if you are shooting your gun, you have explosions going on around you, it's gonna make it a lot harder for you to hear things like people walking, pings going on, planting noises, so it's gonna make it harder for you to hear your enemy. That is why I personally ran night mode for the longest amount of time when I was playing Siege. However, the one downside to this is because the audio is more compressed, it's harder for you to hear directional audio above and below you, at least in my experience. I think that that is more of a detriment than your ability to hear footsteps in the first place, as if you have a good headset, that's not going to be an issue. So I think hi-fi is the best for more accurate information and higher quality audio, whereas night mode is good if you want to be able to hear things in general in case you have a really loud headset that you use. So in my professional opinion, quote unquote professional, I think hi-fi is the best option. Other than that, nothing in here really matters. Obviously, make sure that your input and output are set correctly so you can talk and hear through the right things. Make sure that your audio output is on stereo. Mono is going to make it to where you don't hear things individually. Every piece of audio is being displayed through both your earphones, so you can't distinguish from left and right, whereas stereo you can. These options right here are your voice chat audio options. I can't do them because I'm in a custom game. Make sure you have push to talk on. Your voice chat volume is how loud or quiet you hear other people in the game. Your input volume is how loud you're going to be compared to other people. And your sensitivity is what your mic is going to pick up. So if you have a fan going on in the background that you don't want people to hear, turning down your sensitivity sensitivity is going to make it to where they can't hear your fan, but they'll still be able to hear your voice. Turning this down or up is going to make it to where any audio, no matter if it's a fan or your voice, is going to be lower or quieter, and this is just other people and how you hear them. Moving on from audio, let's go into control settings. First of all, you want to make sure that your raw input for your mouse and keyboard is on. If your mouse has built-in mouse acceleration or your Windows settings have mouse acceleration on, that's going to be bad for you because it's going to make it to where when you move your mouse, your computer is going to be accelerating or decelerating your sensitivity based on how you're moving it, which is good if you're trying to use like a browser, but bad for gaming if you want to be precise. Turning on raw input for your mouse and keyboard is going to disable anything like that, so you don't have to go to your settings to do it, so turning this on is going to be great. Obviously, don't have mouse look inversion on. Enable mouse scroll so you can switch between your weapons pretty seamlessly. If you're on a controller, turn off vibration, turn off trigger effect, and then make sure that your controller rotation is on classic. Aside from that though, I want to go over my sensitivity. Now, I have a sensitivity multiplier, which essentially makes it to where all of the numbers you see for my sensitivity represent different values. So in the base game, without changing any of my game files, my preferred sensitivity is 6.6. So if you don't want to mess with any of your in-game files for multipliers and you just want my sensitivity, 6.6 is what it would be for you. But if you want to have a different multiplier, which I'll explain why you would want that later, go to your documents, go to my games, go to Rainbow Six Siege. I have 2 accounts and it will be different for each of them, so make sure you pick the right account. Pick your account, click this, and then what you're going to do is under the input tab, on the left, you see mouse sensitivity multiplier unit. I think by default, this is set to 0.02. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong on that, but mine is 0.002. What this does, if you press file save and you relaunch your game, is it makes it to where every single number on this sensitivity wheel is divided by 10 for your sensitivity. So 6.6 to you is 60 for me. Same sensitivity, but just a different number because I changed my file settings. The reason that you want to do this is, let's say that without changing your files, you want your sensitivity to be higher than 5, but less than like 6. This is what I wanted for a while, and the only way you can get in between that is if these numbers weren't 5.5 and 6.6, but instead they were 50 and 60. That way you could get like a sensitivity of 55, or in your case, 5.5, right? So changing your multiplier allows you to be more precise with the exact sensitivity you want, if that's something that you do want. Next up, I'm gonna go to my mouse ADS sensitivity. Obviously turn this on to advanced so you can change the sensitivity of every single scope. For my 1X, I run 50. That's pretty high for most people. For my 2.5 and 3.5, I run 60. You usually want these to be the same, as the magnification between the two is not such a large gap that like you want a different sensitivity. It'll just make you more consistent. And then the same thing for the 5X and 12X scopes. I have it on 90. Most people have it in like the 120 range. I find that that's way too fast, so I lowered mine. But even with all of my sensitivity stuff that I've showed you, the best thing you can do is find a sensitivity that works best for you. You never should copy somebody else's sensitivity unless you're just looking to try something new, as copying their sensitivity won't make you aim like them. Instead, find one that you think is the best for you and train that for hours, and that is how you will become as good as the people that you want to become in terms of their aim. Some more important settings are your gadget and drone deployment. You want these both on advanced. Now, first up, I'm going to go over why you want your gadget deployment on advanced. Let's say I'm playing Thermite and I'm trying to open a wall, but there's a bandit on this wall. Well, if your gadget deployment was on standard, you would click your ability button outside of the wall and it wouldn't put your Thermite in your hands. The only way that your Thermite would be able to be put on the wall is if you were standing on the wall. Then it would pull it out and place it down immediately. The reason this is bad is because if you pull your Thermite out just like this and you stand outside the wall and you wait a few seconds until your EMP goes off, then you can just put it on the wall, which takes less time than whipping your gadget out and putting it on the wall. And that extra time that you have of already having your gadget out so that you can put it on later is a very significant amount of time and can be the difference between you getting that wall open and that wall staying closed. So that's why you want to have your gadget deployment on advanced, but why do you want to have your drone deployment on advanced? Well, if you didn't know, having your drone deployment on advanced makes it to where when you throw your drone down, you don't automatically just get on it. To show you why this is important, let's say that I'm outside this window and I want to drone this room out. Well, the danger of droning a room out is that somebody could be on the other side of that room, wait for you to get on your drone, and then come kill you the second they hear you get on that drone. You can't really do much about this because your gun isn't up, which is a free kill for them. However, if you know that they listen for an audio cue to come kill you, you can abuse this. If you throw your drone down, they're gonna hear that and come swing you. Now, if your drone deployment is on advanced, you're not immediately gonna get on that drone, so you can still have your gun up and wait for them to swing you and get a free kill and bait them essentially. But if your drone deployment wasn't on advanced, the second you threw that thing, you'd get on it, then they would hear that and you wouldn't have the reaction time to get off of it and then shoot them. So always make sure that this is on advanced and you never ever don't have your drone deployment on advanced. Next up, let's talk about all of the things that you can either have on hold or toggle. I think having aim on hold just makes more sense. Let's say you're aimed in just like this. If you want to unaim, it is a lot quicker to unaim by releasing your mouse than it would be if you had to click your mouse again to be able to un-ADS. It just saves about ½ second, which could be the difference between you dying or not, which is why you usually will have it on hold. On Blackbeard, it's also nice because you're able to spam your shield going up and down, which can confuse any defenders. So there's another reason. Something you actually want on toggle, though, is your lean. Having your lean on toggle makes it more precise when you get to the point of the game where you're learning quick peeks. I personally don't have my lean on toggle because I never have, and I've learned to quick peek with it on hold, which is possible, but it's a lot harder to do. So if you're starting out, just do it on toggle. It's going to be a little harder starting out to learn how to lean correctly, but it's going to make quick leaning a lot easier and more mechanically precise in the future when that becomes something that you're used to. Again, I have it on lean because I've adapted to be able to do it. It's what I'm used to, but do as I say, not as I do. Obviously, you're going to want to have crouch prone on toggle and sprint on hold. Sprinting on toggle might be acceptable, but I just have it on hold. And then for my console people, I'm not really a console expert. I've only played a few seasons of console when shooters are really bad on PC, but I'll give you the limited knowledge that I do have to make you a little bit better. First of all, for your dead stick zones, you would think that you'd want to have these on 0. That's not the case. You actually do want to have a little bit of a dead stick zone so that if you lightly just accidentally tap your sticks, you don't move like 30 degrees to the left. You want to be able to actually have to put in a little bit of input for your sticks to move. So having it on 5-5 is usually what I've seen people do. And then trigger dead zones, I've seen people put on 0 or on 5-5 or anything in between that. Again, not a console expert, so I don't know, but you don't want any dead stick zones beyond that for pretty much anything. For your sensitivity, most people will actually have a different vertical than horizontal sensitivity just because of how recoil and sticks work on console, whereas on PC, your sensitivity is the exact same for your X and Y axis. So make sure you look up a different guide on what your sensitivity should be on controller and what your settings should be on controller, because honestly, I'm just not the best person to ask. Next up, let's go to the general settings. If you want to be able to talk and chat on PC, make sure your text chat channel is set to all. By default, it's only set to team chat, so you have to set this on. Make sure match replay is on. That way you can look at your past games and be able to learn from your mistakes. I think that's really nice. One thing also that you should have on is visible throw trajectory. Visible throw trajectory is just the white line that goes from your hand to wherever what you're throwing is going to go. So for example, if I want my smoke grenade to land exactly on top of that bear, maybe it's some like glitch spot, whatever it may be, having visible throw trajectory on will show me exactly where the smoke grenade is going to land and allow me to make precise throws every time I throw something. So now that smoke is on top of the bear. Having this off literally just puts you at a disadvantage for 0 reason and makes it to where you will miss things, especially starting out. So make sure you have this setting on. Even if you're an advanced player, there's no reason to not have this setting on, as you can get way more accurate lineups for everything in this game. Something else you need to make sure you turn on is the manual setting for drone after prep. So in this game, there's a prep phase and an action phase. And when you're on your drone just like this, by default, when the prep phase timer ends and the action phase begins, you are going to get kicked off of your drone so that you can spawn in and start attacking the building. This might seem good as it saves time. However, this is not good. Let's say a defender is chasing my drone right now and I want to escape out of the building. If someone is chasing my drone actively and the prep phase ends and I get kicked off of my drone, that defender is going to shoot my drone because I'm not on it to be able to keep running away from him. However, if you turn this on to manual, this makes it to where it will only take you off your drone when you actually physically press your drone button to get off your drone, meaning that when the prep phase ends, you won't be kicked off and you can escape with your drone as much as you want to. I've found that this has saved my drone's life more times than I can count in a single day, and it is genuinely very helpful, so make sure you turn it on to manual. Now, some people like to turn it on to semi-automatic. This makes it to where you won't get kicked off of your drone just like manual, but if you're on a teammate's drone, you'll get automatically taken off of that one, so it's like a best between both worlds scenario. I think this is a bad idea. There are a lot of times, especially in higher elo, when my teammates or your teammates, for example, will want me to be on a camera after the prep phase. Let's say, for example, that my teammates want to rush rafters and the enemies are on the top floor, and my teammates want me to make sure that nobody goes into rafters after the prep phase ends, so he can just run up in here for absolutely free. If I were to have semi-automatic droning on, because this is my teammate's drone that he wanted me to watch, I would get kicked off and be forced to get back on again. And in that time where I get kicked off and I'm forced to get back on again, somebody can cross your screen. You would think that that's really rare and you have to have bad timing for that to happen, but it has happened to me so many times, which is why I think you should never have your drone on automatic or even semi-automatic, and just do yourself and your teammates a favor and put it on manual. Also, make sure that your diffuser pickup is on both. In this game, there's 2 ways to pick up a diffuser. You can either press F or you can run over the diffuser. If you don't have it set to both, you're essentially only allowing yourself one way to pick up the diffuser, by either picking it up or running over it, but putting it on both makes it to where you can do both. Sometimes you need to be able to pick it up from a distance so somebody can't shoot you because they're guarding the diffuser, but sometimes you can't do that and you have to be able to run over it and go somewhere else and not die. So having the option to do both is never going to hurt you, so I recommend you do it. Also, make sure that your pings are on, that way you can see and receive and do pings. This should be on by default, but make sure it's on. Cycle inside camera groups makes it to where if you're on cameras and there are other camera options, like let's say I hack a default camera as Brava, cycling inside camera groups means that if I were to be on the first drone, cycle to the second drone, and then press E to cycle to a different camera, you're essentially making it to where you can't do that and you just cycle back to the first drone. I like that because if all I'm trying to do is use drones right now and I don't want to accidentally switch to a default camera that my Brava hacked, it won't switch me to that camera. So I like to cycle inside camera groups only and then use a separate keybind to go to a different camera. That way I'm more precise. That's personal preference, up to you, but that's personally what I do. That's pretty much it for the general settings. Now let's go over the second to last tab in the settings tab, which is your HUD. Now, unlike other settings that are default in this game, the default or normal HUD setting preset is actually pretty good. The only difference I would make is making your compass appearance from advanced and putting it on simplified. Like I said way earlier in the video, having less on your screen and less things going on is going to make it way easier for you to focus, which will make you overall a better player. Even simple things like changing the way your compass looks and making things smaller on your HUD makes a big difference. I think location pings matter, especially to new players. Location pings essentially are when you ping somewhere just like this. As you can see in the right next to my compass, it says that ping is on second floor landing. So if my teammate pings somebody in Boar and I am a room across, my depth perception is not good because that's in between like 3 different walls. So I don't know if that one ping is in Boar, if that's in Trophy, if that's in the hallway. I don't know. I know it's a little far away because it says 14 meters on the ping, but in the bottom right next to my compass, it says second floor Trophy entrance. So I know, hey, Trophy entrance, otherwise known by most people as Boar, is where the enemy is. He's not in the hallway, he's not in the door, so I know, let me look at Boar. That's really good for not only learning callouts, but as a new player, learning the depth perception of pings and just having more accurate information overall. Now, with the introduction of year 10, it has been leaked online that you'll be able to change the color of your pings. I think it's even been announced by Ubisoft, so I don't think I'm leaking anything that most people don't already know. For existing players, I think having it on yellow is going to be your best bet because that's just what you're used to seeing. But in the future, who knows? That might not be the case. Also, especially if you're new, having the current location on is great. The current location setting essentially tells you the room that you're standing in, which is the text that's above my compass. As you can see, it says second floor landing because I'm in landing. Landing, as most people know it, is just when you're on this brick floor right here. It's gonna say that I'm in landing when I'm over here, but most people call this little square of floor lamp or couch. I've heard like a lot of callouts. I personally will call it lamp, but you get the idea. Now I know, hey, this room is landing. This room right here is called skull because there's a statue with a skull on it. So learning more important callouts is going to make this compass setting less and less useful. But hey, now I know this is called trophy, so I'm gonna start calling this trophy. This is called astronomy, and you always want to shorten callouts. So now I know I'm gonna call this astro, right? So just having this when you're a new player is very, very helpful as it'll teach you what all of the rooms are called. So make sure you have that on. You can turn it off if you want. I recommend it, especially if you're a good player, as again, having things more simplified is going to be better, but depends on your skill level. Objective markers essentially are the markers that are on your compass that show the direction of where the bomb sites are. You can turn that off too, honestly. Pretty much everything here you can turn off. It's up to you on how simplified you want your game to be and how much knowledge you have. I personally have most things on, as when I record, I like to turn everything off, including the match header. It just makes the recording look a lot better. And if I want to turn on a completely custom HUD preset, it's a lot of work, so I just turn on normal and call it a day because I don't want to have to do all that work. But for most players, turning most things off is going to be your best bet. There is one thing that I do think you need to keep though, and that is a certain amount of action reminders. So action reminders by default are the things that pop up on the lower middle half of your screen that tell you that you can do something. So for example, when I go to near a door, it's going to tell me, hey, you can hold F to put a barricade down. When you're new to the game, you need that because you need to know what you're able to do and you need to know how you're able to do it. Most people think that when they're good at the game, they don't need this. I know when I have this off that I can barricade this door without an action reminder, and having those reminders can cover up a lot. But there are some certain scenarios where it can be useful. For example, sometimes you'll melee a barricade, but you don't know if both of your melees hit. Sometimes you'll melee it twice and the game will bug out and it won't allow you to jump out. As you can see right now, I'm not able to jump out even though I hit the barricade twice. Good players know it's because I hit this sliver, but some people might not know that. And the game does bug out even if I do hit it twice on this part of the barricade. So you can turn your action reminders off of default, but I recommend at least having the icons only on, even if you're a good player. That way, you know if you're able to jump out or not. As you can see, I'm not able to, but if I melee it a second time, I know I'm able to. That way you can actually run out when you need to, which can be the difference between you getting a kill. And you'll also know when you're able to plant the bomb behind an OSA shield. Sometimes planting on an OSA shield makes it to where you can't plant the bomb because it's going to force you to pick up or put down your OSA shield. But having the icons lets you know when you have the option of being able to plant depending on where you're looking. There's a lot of examples, but having at bare minimum the icon on, I think is very important. Next up, we're going to go over having the opponent rim light on. I recommend having that on. It makes your opponents easier to see. I think having outlines for your teammates are pretty bad. I always turn that off. Sometimes there will be an enemy, like let's say right here. Let's say there's an enemy on this doorway, but I have a teammate who from my perspective, let's say it's like right here. I have a teammate who from my perspective is directly behind this dude. I'm going in my head to see that outline and then see a body in front of that outline and think, oh, that body is my teammate's body. Let me not shoot him. When in reality, it's an enemy that just appears to have an outline because your teammate is behind him, which makes you hesitate and not kill that dude, and that dude's gonna kill you because he doesn't have your problem. That happens a lot. More times than I would like to admit. But if you have the outlines off, you never have that issue. However, that can make it to where, because you're used to having teammate outlines on, when you see a teammate, you might accidentally team kill him. All right, I'm going in.
What are you doing?
As you can see from this clip, I don't have outlines on or usernames on, which makes it hard for me to have depth perception, and I'm on high alert, I'm on edge, so the second I saw a body, I shot it. That does happen sometimes. So instead of having outlines and usernames off like I do, I recommend actually having outlines off, but having your usernames on. That way you know where an enemy is, but it's not blocking vision from where your teammates are, where your enemies are. If you're good at the game, I recommend having only icons on, as having a username can do the same thing that having outlines on, which is like, you know, blocking people. But until you're actually good at the game and you constantly know where your teammates are because you have good game sense, I would recommend at least having their usernames on, but you can turn off their outlines. I know that this video was a lot, and this can seem pretty overwhelming, but we're almost done with the video, so just stick to the end. You've made it pretty far. Because the last tab of settings that you have to worry about is in the privacy tab. This doesn't really matter unless you're streaming the game or recording the game. Hiding a commendation streak doesn't matter. Hiding your region and latency does matter if you're streaming, as you don't want people to stream snipe you, so make sure that is on. Having a hidden matchmaking delay will also be good if you're a streamer. Renaming players is really good as well if you're a YouTuber specifically, because people can literally just go to their nickname and put just like the straight N-word as their nickname. So you really don't want that to appear in a YouTube video for the sake of you making money, and you don't want to get banned on Twitch for having that on your stream. Hiding your avatar can be useful so people can't recognize if it's you that you're playing against. Appearing as you is good for YouTube videos so people can't add you that you don't want them to add you. And then this just allows you to be whatever name that you want with a few numbers behind it if other people also have that name. Ed Sheeran is personally my name because I am a ginger, and my Twitch chat makes fun of me for it a lot. Quick plug, by the way, go follow the Twitch. I stream every single day. But that's just me. Now that we're done with all of the settings though, let's go over just a few matchmaking settings you need. When you go to the quick play tab, go to settings on your quick match and just turn on bomb. Do not have secure area or hostage on. You can do this if you want to have fun, but ranked is only the bomb based game mode. So training yourself on bomb is going to be the best if you want to actually learn the game the quickest. For arcade, I recommend only having on free for all or team deathmatch. This will get you used to fighting actual players with guns that you will actually be using, whereas weapon roulette and golden gun are not realistic to what you're going to be using and won't warm you up properly. In standard, make sure that you're only playing ranked maps. One, so you don't have to play tower ever in your life again, but also so you can actually get better at playing ranked maps when you go to play ranked. And then for map training settings, you can do any side as random. I would turn off pre-destruction. I think having an aggressive target is dumb. You don't need them to shoot you back. That's not the point of this. If you wanted to, you would just go to an arcade. I turn on headshot only to practice my crosshair placement. I recommend you do that too. And then just in case you were wondering, these are my shooting range settings. If you want to get good at your macro flick, which is the big flick that you use to, you know, flick to like the other side of a room, these settings with big ball is going to be your best bet. However, if you're like me and smaller precision is what you have the most trouble on compared to larger precision, then I recommend actually turning on the ball to small ball like I have right here. This will make your micro precision a lot more accurate. So depending on what you need to train, those are the settings I recommend. But with that out of the way, that is it for today's video. Check out my Twitch in the description. My name's Alka, and check out this next YouTube video on your screen.